You know, so much of the time we're just lost. I say, please, God, tell us what is right. Tell us what is true.
Oh my goodness, folks. It's the show I didn't think I would do. As I said in past episodes, I had a feeling of ennui about this movie. I did not want to see Joker Part 2.
Double ennui.
Dear friend, Professor Dr. Gareth Higgins said it is a masterpiece or near masterpiece, so we had to talk about it. I cannot wait for this discussion. I'm Jett Lowe.
I'm Gareth Higgins. The conversation never ends, and that's absolutely true. Jett was reluctant to see this film, even more so than I was, but I saw it out of loyalty to cinema.
Yes.
And because I had such a strong negative reaction to the first Joker, and I was surprised. And we're going to get into it. We're going to get into it, dear listener. You know the premise of Joker. Arthur Fleck, played by Joaquin Phoenix, is in Arkham State Hospital for the. Is it just Arkham State Hospital?
It's basically the hospital for the criminally insane out of Toby Hooper's Life Force.
Yes, with a touch of Silence of the Lambs, a soupçon of Silence of the Lambs. He's in there awaiting trial for the Murder City first Joker film, including one on national television in his attempt at getting noticed. That's where the film begins in terms of its live action.
And we're going to talk about that. The film does open with the cartoon.
It does. Prior to that, an extraordinary cartoon by Sylvain Chomet, who made Belleville Rendezvous or The Triplets of Belleville, one of the great films of the century, which establishes right up front this film is about taming the shadow or not. And I believe we have a clip.
We do have a clip. In this clip, there's a clip from Joker Part 2. Let's listen in.
You should see it out there. They're all going crazy for you. You did it.
I don't know. Maybe I should read a law book or something. Even though I never went to high school.
I said no touching.
You can do anything you want. You're Joker.
That was Joker, Folie, Deux. It's a film, Gareth, dear listeners, that answers that immortal cinematic question. What if you remade Frost Nixon with Steve Coogan and Joaquin Phoenix as Nixon? How about that? Wait, I got another one. What if you remade An American in Paris, but the Gene Kelly character was even more insufferable? I know you loved this film, Gareth. Take it away.
Okay.
Important movie.
So what bothered me about the first Joker, it's important to get that out of the way, is it seemed to me like it was almost endorsing, if not the terrible things that Arthur Fleck / Joker does, but at least the response to those terrible things, that because he's killing the rude, because he's killing celebrities, and because he's acting from a place of isolation, fear, loss, and abandonment. That let's get one over on the man, right? And the film bothered me intensely. So I was reluctant to see Folie, Deux. And I got to say, I've had an experience with this film over the last, I guess, 12 days since I saw it the first time that I think is unique. You might be able to remind me of another example of where this happened, but I'm not sure I've seen a film that has made me reconsider and reevaluate. I'm not sure I've seen a sequel that's made me reconsider and reevaluate the original film as strongly as this film has done in positive terms. I've seen sequels or follow-ups that have made me feel more negative toward the original. Pulp Fiction made me think that I had overrated Tarantino when I was so taken with Reservoir Dogs. This film, Joker Folie Deux, does the reverse. I do think it is, and this word masterpiece, like let's use it. It's a synonym for great.
You texted me possibly in haste because you were so excited after seeing.
Oh,
this film.
I mean, well, I was thrilled. I've seen this film
Thrilled.
3 times now.
Three times.
Once in French, once
in
in
French.
which really heightened with no subtitles, and which really heightens the physicality and the vibe.
Okay,
of
I have
the
to ask you
performances.
something. Can I have to?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes,
you've
I'm
seen it
open to
3
all
times.
questions.
3
Yes.
times. Once in French. Do you speak French?
Un petit peu.
Okay, not very much.
That
Little
is
bit.
true. That is true. No, it was an accent. I didn't realize it was going to be in French. I mean,
But you saw it in France.
More fool me. I was in France. I was
would
in
kind of
France
expect.
in a French cinema.
Yes, they
but,
dub.
the French they often do do screen films in their original language.
They do.
I didn't.
Well,
I did not think to check on this occasion. At any rate, I do think this is a truly great film. If by great we mean what happens when technical craft and aesthetic reaching for the stars marries itself to a humane concern for the common good. This film is compassionate from start to finish and makes me read backwards the original film. I now see Joker Part 1 as just that, the first half of a 2-part film. Whether Todd Phillips and Scott Silver, the co-writers of the screenplay, intended this from the start, or their story for the second film was a reaction to the way the first film was received uncritically, and I mean uncritical of Joker's actions, I don't know. I'm not sure that it matters. In fact, I think you could make a case that it's a stronger film if they were informed by the reaction to the first film. At any rate, I found this to be a tremendously moving film that actually takes the guy's problems seriously. It respects him enough to say, you are, I think at one point the psychiatrist played by Ken Leung says that Arthur is subject to a handful of very common psychiatric or mental conditions to do with long-term deep sadness. But he effectively says there's lots of people who experience deep sadness and they don't go and do these things. And this is not a justification for what you have done. He's immediately responded to by Catherine Keener's lawyer saying, well, did you ask him about the abuse he suffered as a child? And the answer is basically no. And so the film is not trying to, it certainly doesn't scapegoat Arthur. What it does is it induces empathy. There's a whole lot more I want to say about this film, but I want to, the thing I want to say to start with and just leave it at this point is that whereas my first experience of the first film in the absence of this one was just anger and a sense of being alienated by the film itself, this one induced empathy from start to finish for basically every character in the film, especially for Arthur. And it culminates, I don't know how much
Gary
we want to do in terms
Puddles.
of
We got to talk about the Gary Puddles bit.
I want to talk about Lee Gill. It's the greatest scene of the year. It's the greatest performance of
Absolutely
the year.
Fantastic.
I'm wondering about how much we should spoil it or not. The film, the film is one of the effectively one of the biggest flops, in history, and one of the most negatively responded to by critics as well as audiences. So we will spoil it and say this film ends on a note of nothing less than Shakespearean tragedy. And it frankly, the method by which this tragedy happens.
Wait, what tragedy? What kind of tragedy isn't Shakespearean? Because that guy he covered a lot of stuff.
Well, there were Greek tragedies before then.
There
were Greek tragedies before.
But I'm talking about in the modern age. Anyway.
And so frankly, the film it reminded me most of was Roman Polanski's Macbeth, which ends with a kind of I think he's a junior knight. riding off away from the court to bring news of Macbeth's killing to the rest of the kingdom. And you hear almost imperceptibly as he's riding off to spread this news, you hear the three weird sisters, often known as the witches, calling to him again, and you get the sense of, oh, the cycle has begun. The cycle has begun one more time. So this film ends with a tragedy for Arthur and a tragedy for the world. I think it's just brilliant. I haven't even begun to talk about how it looks, how the performances are. Never mind Lady Gaga. We'll get to all of this, I hope. I'm really grateful this film exists. I'm glad to be talking with you about it, Jett. I'd love to hear what you think about Joker, Folie à Deux. Did you see it in French?
If only. Also, let's not forget the ending of Carlito's Way. Almost kind of a Shakespearean tragedy. Very much like, this film wears its influences on its sleeve. Well, you talk about Joker and people's reaction to it, perhaps contributing to your reaction to it. The first Joker reminded me so much of Breaking Bad in that, I have friends of mine who love the Walter White character from Breaking Bad. I don't know if you've seen that show, Gareth. For folks that haven't, there's a protagonist who does terrible things over the course of time in response to a variety of adverse situations. By the end of the show, you're not supposed to root for this person. He's a terrible person. And yet the people I know, people I count as friends, even though we disagree about cinema and entertainment content, entertainment products, they're rooting for him, and they hate the character of Walter White's his wife, Skylar. I'm like, no, you're not supposed to hate her. This Walter White is a terrible person. And so they're cheering for this Arthur Fleck character in the first Joker. I can appreciate that as such a turnoff. It's really been interesting. I don't watch trailers. I try to stay away from all the movie news, but I did get the feeling that nobody was going to see this. I saw this in a massive theater. I was the only one there. And this reminded me so much of the great movie. I think you think it's a great film, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward, Robert Ford. So I remember watching in the United States, and there was nobody in the theater, and it was bombing. And I thought, this film is astonishing. Why this film, like if this came out in 1975, would be nominated for Best Picture. And then I happened to be flying to London the next day after I saw it, and I, get off the tube, get out of Heathrow, get off the Underground, and there's posters all in the Underground station saying, 5 stars, and all the British critics calling it a masterpiece. And that's how I feel about this picture. If you had told me after seeing this, if I had heard nothing before, if you had told me the audiences were going crazy for this movie, their critics were giving it the 5 stars and saying a masterpiece, I would have said, yes, of course. It's a modern American classic. And that's not the situation we're in. Now, the film is flawed, but it's a heck of a motion picture, dear listeners. Is the movie too long? Yes, it should have been a tight 90 minutes. Gareth loved that there's an opening animated cartoon. You know what? Cut that out. We don't need the cartoon. No, here's what you do. Here's what you do to save this film. It's very easy to give advice in hindsight, because the film is tanked. People are angry that it's a musical they weren't expecting. It reminds me of a dear friend of mine. She and her mom were killing some time one day. They went to see the Chicago, Catherine Zeta-Jones. They didn't know it was a musical. They did not have a good time. They were hoping for a Catherine Zeta-Jones. Maybe it's a rom-com, or maybe she's a super spy. We're not expecting a musical. Here's what they should have done. Again, easy to give advice in retrospect. Take that musical, right? Take that anime cartoon, which is not necessary because it's the whole thing about me and my shadow. That's already explicit in the movie. We don't need it spelled out. In fact, it diminishes to spell it out so much. You take that anime cartoon, it's Warner Brothers, right? You put that cartoon in front of other Warner Brothers movies in the 6 months leading up to the release of this. And the end credits, just like they did with, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but after the fact. The end credits of the cartoon, you say, coming, you give the release date, Joker, and change the title, Joker: the musical. So that everybody, they're blown away by this amazing cartoon, and you call it Joker the musical, you prime the audience, you prime the critics, boom, boffo box office. I'm telling you, this film is great. Cut it down 90 minutes. Too many musical numbers. At a certain point, I'm alone in the theater, so I'm allowed to talk back to the screen. Normally I wouldn't. As soon as, let's say, Arthur Fleck is, on his bunk bed, or he's in the bathroom on the toilet, and someone hands him a microphone, I was like, oh God, here we go. He's going to do a John Denver song. So too many musical numbers. cut out 30 minutes of this movie because it runs over 2 hours. He's not Gene Kelly over here, okay? Cut it down to a tight 90, lose the cartoon, tell everybody it's a musical up front, get people excited about it. You got a box office smash. Film was great. Joker, Cole, and the musical, go see it.
We're going to agree to disagree about whether it's too long and whether or not you should drop the cartoon.
Do you wish? Can I ask you one quick question?
Yes,
Arthur Fleck does his closing argument. Do you wish, and I thought they might do this, when I saw there was an establishing shot of the courtroom and I went, oh, wow. I literally thought his closing argument.
Sometimes we're just so lost.
So much of the time, we're just lost. I thought he was going to do Paul Newman from The Verdict.
Yeah,
instead he does the Southern lawyer accent. Well, I don't know.
Oh, it's so great. It's so
great. It is great. It is great.
And he can't keep the accent up when his feelings
break through. His feelings
break through because he's being confronted. I don't think I've ever seen this in a courtroom drama. There's a moment where Gary Puddles, Lee Gill playing Gary Puddles, who's in the first film, he's a workmate of Arthur's. He's the only Arthur's the only person who doesn't make fun of him. He has other workmates who make fun of him out of prejudice. He's a little person, and he's the butt of their jokes. And then he witnesses this horrendous murder, which Arthur can't understand. That why Gary is so bothered by the murder, because Arthur tells Gary, "Don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you." This kind of twisted logic. I've known people. I was going to say I've known people like this. I haven't known people who've gone that far, but let's say in terms of the
there's
analogy,
still time.
People, and maybe I've been this person. Maybe we can all be this person.
Okay.
Who have, I guess, what you call the Janus face, where people who are capable of being kind to one person who, and at the very same moment, in the very same room, are cruel to somebody else. I actually heard Eric Roberts, the great Eric Roberts, being interviewed the other day and saying that his father was kind to everybody except him.
Oh,
right?
Goodness.
Okay, I've encountered people like that. Arthur can't understand, in a sense that, why is Gary bothered by this? And he gets confronted in one of these culminating moments in the courtroom. It's a scene that maybe it has a precedent in movies. I can't recall seeing it. Can you recall seeing a scene where a witness on a stand in a courtroom cowers in fear when the person cross-examining them comes close to them? Cowers in fear. There's a moment where Gary kind of recoils because Arthur leans in. And there are things that happen that day and that night, which are, there are horrendous things that happen to Arthur that night. And there are important things, honorable things that he is confronted by that afternoon that makes his conversion, as it were, or his repentance utterly plausible. And this is what I think is bothering people about the movie. What's bothering people about the movie is that someone that they project, an anti-hero who they projected their kind of, or we, I don't want to say we projected our desires onto, is rejecting those desires by repudiating the choices that he made in the first film. It's a little bit like if Hannibal Lecter, after Silence of the Lambs, if they'd made a sequel, instead of making, what was the sequel to Silence of the Lambs? Hannibal was the sequel, Red Dragon was the prequel, I guess. If in the sequel to Hannibal Lecter, he rejected his life of cannibalism and refined cruelty and acknowledged, hey, I was wrong all along. I shouldn't have done those terrible things. I was just looking for attention because I'm deeply lonely.
Here's the problem, though, I had with this in the film. The repudiation is great. He says there is no Joker, and he is conscious of the incredible harm that he's caused. He killed 6 people. Lee Gill's performance as Gary Puddles, you completely believe that this would transform, this would open the gates of consciousness and tear down the walls that have been built up for years preventing empathy, right? You have to love yourself, do you, to love others? But something becomes encumbered. Become encumbered with your own bitterness, and your own hurt has built up the walls around this character. But here's the thing: is this scene? Tell me about this, Gareth. Give me your take, because the repudiation. I'm not the Joker. There's no Joker. I did terrible things. Doesn't happen. It could have happened in the afternoon. They could have had the Gary Puddle scene that takes place in the morning, and then then we have a scene where all you have to do is do a close up on his face. Don't need to have any words of dialogue. It's a great scene in Casablanca, right? The turning point of the film. You got Humphrey Bogart. He doesn't want to join the war. He's got he doesn't put his neck out for anyone, for no one, as he says. And then there's a turning point in the film, and he lets the French folks in his cafe play the French national anthem. And they ask him, "Can we play it?" And he nods his head.
In French, no less.
In French. And he nods his head. And that head nodding is brilliant, and it's so decisive. And of course, in reality, they didn't even have the script. The director just said to Michael Curtiz, "Hey, Bogey, just stand over there, just nod your head. Boom, we'll cut that in." Great. My point is, you didn't even have dialogue. You could do the Gary Puddles, and then we see during the lunch break, sitting alone, he's smoking. There's the Joker, but not the Joker. There's Arthur Fleck realizing. But that's not what happens in the film. There's that, and then he's brutally assaulted, and it's implied that he's raped by Brendan Gleeson and other prison guards. And then after that brutalizing, then he says that there's no Joker. Now, so it's there's a lot of different ways to read that. Is that the effect of being brutalized, realize that he has brutalized others? It was not necessary, and I felt that was a real misstep, which is why it's in talking to you now the film's becoming downgraded. It's going down, because these are just thoughts, dear listeners. We do the show freeform. It's going down now. It's going down. It's diminishing.
You haven't seen it 3 times. You haven't seen it in French. No. And you only finished watching it an hour ago, so it's all very fresh. It's all very fresh.
Getting diminished now.
It seems I
was that
hear
necessary? Why was it necessary to have the Brendan Gleeson scene? Every scene in a film should be necessary.
I think partly what's happening here is this is a film that's trying to say something about the world in which we live, where people are brutalized and where authoritarian systems do brutalize people in such ways. Something that you didn't mention was, there is a lot of activity that goes on in that last day of the trial.
Yes.
One thing you didn't mention is his young friend in the asylum also gets murdered by one of the guards just after they throw Arthur back into his cell. And he's lying there, having been violated in this way, and he hears his young friend die. And you could say this is over the top, it's melodramatic, there's just
it's
too
a musical.
much there.
So you're allowed to do that.
Or you could also say that in real life, regret doesn't often happen in the moment, so it doesn't make it makes sense to me. I've had many. You and I have had conflicts.
This is a stylized musical. In this way, you should cut out the scenes, take it away, strip it down. Yeah. Here's the narrative. There's do 6 musical scenes. Tighten it up.
Not if you're trying to make The Godfather Part 2 of comic book movies, which is what this is.
Fair enough.
Or The One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest of comic book movies, which is also what this is. I have often apologized after a beat or two, no pun intended. Once it has taken me. It's taken me years, in some cases, to realize my mistake or my error. Or maybe later that day, I'll say, fair enough. I think I think I stepped over the line there, or whatever. That whole section feels totally credible to me.
Okay.
Is that the next day is, what do they call it? The summing up, the final speech. In that speech,
sometimes we're all just lost.
Knock, knock, who's there? Arthur Fleck, who? What a beautiful piece of writing. Speaking directly to the audience. And so, yeah, I hear you, and I find it totally credible. Not to mention the fact that I've heard other critics mentioned this too. There's an implicit relationship with the murder of George Floyd, and the murder of this other young character in the asylum. This film is about. I mean, that's the thing. Like, not simply that relationship with the real world, and the film is freaking people out because it's speaking subliminally to the world that we're living in right now, and it's saying there's something here we need to confront.
I don't know if people are engaging with it at this level. You talked about why people
They're
weren't
not.
responding to it. But I mean, even in a non-conscious level, I think that, again, going back to the experience of my friend and her mom went to see Chicago. This is not the film that they wanted, and as soon as Lady Gaga starts singing, people, I would imagine, probably groaned. Maybe not the first time, but the second time they realized, and then the third time they're probably like, oh no, what is this? There's a great line in the film. They're watching a musical, a classic Hollywood musical from the, I believe it looks like early 50s, and the character on screen says he's sick of these artificial barriers between musical and drama.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's spot on. You're absolutely right. And this goes back to the audiences of Megalopolis laughing at it. They think it's amateurish, or there's so many ideas, and it feels like at least mainstream cinema goers who are not well versed in what movies can be. I don't know. Am I just crapping on listeners? I'm so sorry, dear listeners. I know you who are listening right now love the movies, and you will dig this crazy motion picture. But it feels like people are really having a problem with things that are different on these big budgets. Blockbusters, not on the small films. People like, I think they loved Pearl probably, and they loved X, and people are seeing Terrifier 3, and there's lots of small budget pictures. But on these big budget pictures, I think they've been conditioned. People have been conditioned by the Marvel movies to expect something. You want your Big Mac. Why am I getting this? Why am I getting this artful piece of sushi when I just want my Big Mac? Does that make any sense?
Well, I think there's something about how we've all been trained to think or not think, and trained to receive what's there. I remember the first time I went to see The Thin Red Line, Terrence Malick's film. I saw it.
So good.
I saw it by myself, like you saw Folie this morning. Saw it by myself in a matinee, and then I went back I think the following night to a late show, and that film ends very quietly. There's been a lot of horror and torment, and then there's this kind of lull. And the lull kind of becomes meditative, contemplative images of trees and almost completely still water, and then there's a fade to black, and then a little fade up when the end credits begin. Some gorgeous music. It's very rare these days for a film to end with a fade. It's very rare for that fade to be accompanied by silence for a few seconds before the music begins. But and I think part of the reason is it is understood audiences want to get out of the theater as soon as they possibly can. They want the lights to be switched on as soon as that can possibly happen. So this beautiful meditative experience, I'm totally caught up in the movie, and I hear the guy behind me turn to the person that he's with and say, "That was the biggest load of shite I've ever seen in my life," right? Those were the exact words. I don't know who he was.
He's someone that does not appreciate the filmography of Terrence Malick.
He's someone that is certainly true. I think you could put money on it that a more accurate statement would be, I don't know what that was. And I don't know how to watch what I just saw. And that may seem condescending. So let me, it probably does seem condescending. So let me own something. I don't know how to talk about music, right? I love music, but I don't understand music. I've tried to, I don't know how to read music in both senses of the term. And I would never try to write about music in the way that I try to talk about cinema. We need to create on-ramps for people
Sure.
so that they can experience this thing that could be deeply life enhancing as this film is. So tell me what you were going to say about
Right, but
the
this
Thin
is
Red
why
Line.
I'm saying the ad campaign should have been dramatic with that cartoon. If the cartoon wasn't finished yet, do something else, do a musical number, and say Joker colon the musical to prime people, because that's the era we're in now with these big budget movies. Is you can't surprise them. If you surprise people with the larger budget pictures, they're going to have real problems. You know, I'm reminded of the great 50s Leslie Nielsen picture Forbidden Planet. Fantastic film, dear listener. If you haven't seen Forbidden Planet, see it for so many different reasons. Science fiction epic of clearly a sort of a forerunner influence for Star Trek and all that. It does not have a conventional score. When the credits come up at the beginning, you see the word electronic tonalities by, and the music is going throughout the whole movie. It's going, you know, like you're in a like you're in France. You're in France. You stumbled into a jazz club underground, and you're terribly hungover, and you don't know what time it is. My point is,
Can you imagine what those sounds sound like in French?
I was gonna try to do some terrible like 1950s or make Casablanca like ooh la la French accent, but I'm not going to. My point is, if you are not accepting of those beep to boops, those electronic tonalities that start, if you're not ready, if you can't accept that, if you're not there for that, if you can't dig that, man, then you're gonna have a bad time during Forbidden Planet. And the same thing with Joker Part 2, or Joker colon the musical, as I call it. If you cannot luxuriate, first accept, then luxuriate. That is my new catchphrase for this week. First accept, then luxuriate. If you cannot accept, then luxuriate in the musicality of this film, you'll have a bad time.
Do you have a good espresso machine in your house?
Oh yeah, can't you tell? High as a kite right now.
Tomorrow morning, when you're making an espresso or an Americano for your beloved, or whoever else might be there in your house, I urge you to hand it to them and say, first accept and then luxuriate.
My new mantra.
Let's talk about Lady Gaga.
Oh, okay. But I thought you just said you can't talk about music. You want to talk about her acting? I thought we were wrapping up on the show.
I'm not an expert on cinema either, but
you've written a bunch of books about it.
I know that I don't know. And well, shockingly enough, in about 75 minutes time, my next one's getting launched, and maybe it'll do as well as Joker. I'd be delighted if my next book does as well as Folie Deux has done. That's fine.
Shouldn't we promote it on the show? We should do
voice crying in the wilderness.
Why don't
voice crying in the wilderness?
Promote it on the show. Next show, we'll promote your book.
Will you read it and talk to me about it?
Sure.
Okay, that would be a delight. Yeah, I don't understand music. But I like to read people who do. I'm not an expert. The reason I said I'm not an expert on cinema either is that's a ridiculous thing for anybody to suggest, except a very, very small number of people. What I am is a lover of movies. I've seen a lot of them. I care a lot about them, and I've been taught some things about how to see and how to not I was going to say how to interpret, but that implies that there's one correct interpretation, which there usually isn't. At any rate, I mean, long story short, Lady Gaga is a fantastic actor. I love seeing her in this. I loved her in House of Gucci, and I loved her in A Star Is Born. I felt I was watching at some level Barbra Streisand in her early performances. I can't wait to see Lady Gaga in a good old slapstick, rip-roaring comedy. Who she represents in this film is the audience, actually, at least the audience who liked Arthur's actions, who sort of sneakingly enjoyed him. And she's brilliant, and it sort of becomes a tautology after a while to say brilliant in regard to this film, because I just think everything about it, everything about it is brilliant.
After talking with you,
is brilliant.
After talking with you,
go back and watch it again.
Oh,
go back
no.
and watch it again. Go back and watch it again.
Dear listener, it is worth.
Ne me quitte pas.
Just remember, dear listener, before going in, just remember about the beep to boops, and you will have a great cinema experience. Again, there's some musical numbers you can duck out a couple times if you need to use the bathroom, or you got to get yourself some M&Ms.
No, you can't. I mean, you can. Nobody's going to stop you. There'll be nobody there to stop you.
Nobody was there. What would you recommend as a companion piece or instead of Joker: the musical?
Instead of watching Joker: the musical once, I would watch it twice.
Okay.
And if you're not going to watch it at all, come back to me in a moment. You tell me your recommendations, and I'll.
Well,
I'll
you know,
tell
on
you
a
mine.
similar, we think about the obsessions that people have, the fandom that people have, that they're putting themselves into this Joker character, and
Yeah.
he himself becomes, he becomes this character, right? I'd recommend Big Fan, starring Patton Oswalt, about an obsessed sports fan. I don't know if you've seen it, Gareth.
I have seen it.
Great movie. It's tight. Great ending. Doesn't cost $200 million like Joker: the musical does.
Yes.
Though, by the way, that money's on screen. The film does look great, but I'd recommend Big Fan. What about you?
Well, the films that, its antecedents are Taxi Driver, The King of Comedy, and to a degree One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But I really don't want to recommend an alternative. I think this film is so good.
Oh,
I'm so glad it exists. I feel genuine, I don't know, I'm going to say sadness that it has flopped. And I think genuine concern that a work of this kind that's trying to say the things that it's saying, which is about that it's possible, it is entirely possible to respect and honor the suffering of lonely people and of deep sadness in our world,
yes.
without using that as an excuse to act out against other people. That's an extraordinarily important thing to say. I think if you look, I mean, we haven't talked about it indeed, and we don't want to get sidetracked into it, but if you look at the way the politics of grievance, which is not a new thing, it just happens to be a very loud thing at the moment. And I grew up in a society where that was what was driving things a lot of the time. This film manages to have compassion for the suffering and to hold boundaries and say, look, whatever you're suffering, whatever the validity of your suffering is, acting out and causing suffering to other people is not a legitimate response to that suffering. And the rest of us need to come up with an answer for you. So I feel genuine sadness and genuine concern. It would be one thing if the audience response and the critical response was actually taking on those questions and making an argument that the film doesn't handle them well. But the negative audience response and the negative critical response that I've seen doesn't even mention these things.
It doesn't address it. No, it doesn't. And that's one of the themes we've been talking about movies for 20 years, is that the critical response is not addressing the meaning of these motion pictures. Now, again, the film is diminishing the more that you talk about it, in the sense that now I'm thinking, well, there was no, what was the action other than saying that there's no Joker? Should he have said to what is it, Bill Smitrovich, who's the character actor? He's in everything, right? He's like the general in Independence Day. The judge. Should he have then said, I'm changed my play, so that he pleads guilty?
Well, no, he does actually say, he says, I am so sorry I hurt those people.
Okay.
He does say, I'm so sorry I hurt those people.
Fair enough.
And I just don't think that he's in a play, like he's not, people often have revelatory moments that take a long time to psychologically.
This is a movie, though. This is a musical. So you don't have to be realistic. It's about heightening. It's about taking things into relief, shaping them into an entertainment that allows us to develop and grow and experience life with new eyes.
Is that what it is?
Do you have one last thing? Is there anything you want to address? Because I looked online.
Yes.
I just finished watching it, and I see people being upset about what they call a twist, which I didn't think was a twist because I just kind of assumed it, of what happened at the end, where it turns out that he's not actually the Joker,
or that there's an endless recurrence of Jokers.
Right, but I think the implication is that he is the Joker that we know, because we see him cut his mouth like, Heath Ledger.
That's what I meant by it's an echo of the last of the ending of Polanski's Macbeth, which actually adds an extra ending to Shakespeare. Shakespeare's Macbeth doesn't end with a junior knight riding off into the distance and being kind of seduced by the three weird sisters, but that film actually, I think the ending of Polanski's Macbeth is better than the ending of the play.
I don't think Shakespeare was
Diminish Macbeth.
precious about his work by this point. Even when he was rewriting during the play, like, oh, that's not working. The audience, the audience isn't going for that one. Hold on, give me about 30 seconds.
Gotcha.
Put this. I gotta
Well,
put the stress on me here, and I'm just gonna rewrite this.
I was just looking there for what I would suggest, not as an alternative, but as a companion piece, and perhaps as you watch this before you watched Joker, the musical, and that would be there's a guy on TikTok called I want to get his name, Jason the Chow, CHAO, so Jason the Chow. And go look at his little video called Spoiler Full Deep Dive of Joker 2.
Okay.
This guy is I like this guy.
Okay. First
I
time
like this
TikTok
guy.
has ever been recommended on.
First time I've ever
The Film
watched
Talk.
a full video on TikTok.
Well, there's a reason for that. I think people are realizing now that with TikTok, the product is not the actual videos. The reason you go on TikTok is to skip the videos. That's the actual thing. That gives the dopamine hit. That's what TikTok is about. It's about the fact that I can skip videos, not watch them. Well, it's been an interesting show, Gareth. Even though Joker Cole in the musical has diminished in my eyes, I still think for the listeners...
It'll bump back up when you see it again.
I still think for the listeners, it's worth watching. Folks, if you want to support the show, don't forget you can go to patreon.com/thefilmtalk and get our bonus and archive episodes. You can subscribe through the Apple Podcast app. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/thefilmtalk. I've enjoyed talking. I've enjoyed being myself. I'm Jett Lowe. Sometimes we're just lost.
We're just lost. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to talk about this magnificent film with you, Jett. I've been Gareth Higgins.
You know who I've been. We'll keep talking.
Next time.